Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. At The Reason We Learn, we aspire to be part of the solution. The purpose of this show is to take a good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated. We know we can do better, and this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to The Reason We Learn. As the intro says, I am your host, Deb Philman, and I have a great show for you today. I'm very privileged to have a network of amazing people who are fighting very hard to protect our children and to improve education, wherever that education happens, even if it's at the therapist's office. And today's guest is no exception to that, and she's been here before, Pamela Garfield-Jaeger. Before we get started, I would ask if you're not currently a subscriber of the channel, please do consider subscribing so you can be notified when I make new content about education and parenting and teaching and all the things. Please like and share this broadcast as well. While Pam is here, it'd be great if people who have questions for her are able to ask them in real time. That would be fantastic. As always, super chats get first dibs, but we will try to get to the questions as they are relevant to our discussion. So if you're unfamiliar with Pamela Garfield-Jaeger has worked as a licensed clinical social worker for over 20 years in a variety of settings and programs. Most recently, she worked with teens in school and outpatient settings. She realized that the vast majority of parents are unprepared to engage the mental health system from a position of knowledge and understanding. So she's here to help educate parents on what to expect and how to interact with that system with mental health care. But specifically today, again, as I said, I'm a very lucky person. I have people like Pam who trust me enough to say, will you take a look at my book? Will you read my book? And I was one of the first people to get to read this amazing, amazing book. So I've brought her here because the book is now out. You can get the Kindle version, and then I guess you could probably pre-order other versions of it. This is something if you're a parent of school-age children, you're going to want this on your shelf. Even if you think you'll never need it, please, to have it and even to have read it and have this in your memory bank to know where to go in the book should you need it, it's going to be indispensable. I'm serious. If your kids are in the school, if you just have kids, if you hand them a smartphone, they need this book. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming to The Reason We Learn again, Pamela Garfield-Jaeger. Hello, hello.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm the privileged one, and I get to
Yeah.
have someone that knows so much to read my book.
But no, I mean, I'm not just like buttering you up here. Okay, the channel is The Reason We Learn. And the title is A Rational Response to Gender Distress, which of course I love on so many levels, But you tell me, why did you pick this title?
Yeah, I know it's been interesting because people mix up the words, but it was very intentional to say rational because what's happening now with kids and with this messaging for trans kids is completely irrational. And so I just give facts and information just so you can think about it from a rational standpoint. And really what I'm writing and what I'm saying, I believe, is what most people agree with now, and certainly more people agreed with in the past before they were kind of bamboozled by all of the mixed messaging that feels good, sounds good, but is irrational.
Right. Now, just for the purposes of this conversation, because I'm kind of a word nerd, would you define for the audience what you mean by rational and irrational? I mean, not necessarily Webster's dictionary, but in relation to therapeutic approaches and mental health care.
Yeah, I actually never thought about defining it, but yeah, what I mean is you need to look at it from a standpoint where you're not overridden by your emotions to the point where you're making unhealthy decisions that don't make any sense.
That works for me. And I would think too, looking at your book, what jumps out consistently in pretty much every chapter, this is one of the things I love best about this book, you guys, is evidence. Remember evidence? Empiricism, you remember that thing where you actually look for things that were measured and not just felt or reported or affirmed or described anecdotally, but were we have a wealth of knowledge gained over time and documented scientifically using proper research methodology. And what Pam has done, what you've done, I'm talking about you like you're not here, but what you've done that I love is in each and every chapter, you include a reference to some, like it's not your opinion. These are, this is clinical information. And here's the key thing I think people don't understand that we had. It's not like there was never a person before 2020 who was gender confused, right?
Right.
So there was a treatment protocol. There were ways of dealing with people old and young, adults, children, et cetera, who presented with some kind of gender confusion. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, and things have gotten much more radical now. We all know, but I don't really get into this in the book. But what I've actually learned just from meeting people like Walt Heyer and other people who are older that have been in in trans medicine, that I've actually learned even in the past that there wasn't even, I'd say, good discretion then, because there has been this clouded picture of this cloud around trans, where the trans doctors, even in the past, were more activists. It's just become more extreme and more radical now, and they didn't involve kids in the past.
Right. So in the past, they at least had some kind of limiting principle, like,
There was some limitations.
okay.
I now believe that there should have been even more. Just from talking to people who went through the system back in the day. I'm talking 80s and 90s. Um, but today things are off the rails. So
Right.
yeah.
Well, what I've noticed most of all is that scared and worried parents, if we're talking about children, which is basically what we're talking about here, are presented with statements as if they are facts, and they they don't have the ability to question it or with anything other than their parent gut, or like, that doesn't make sense to me, which is fairly easy to override using that irrational thing, right? Do you want
Mhm.
your child to die?
Yeah, I mean, it's blackmail.
Right. And so what you've done, I think, is, for parents listening, if you're thinking, I just need to know first of all, what to look for to see that there might be a problem. And then what do I do to get proper help? Because one of the biggest things, isn't it, is like the parent discovers something's up, or the kid, and what happens now? What happens today? Maybe tomorrow will be better because of the WPATH files. But what happens today if a parent is presented with a child who says, I've changed my pronouns and I've decided I want to be the opposite sex, or I'm non-binary or something? What would happen to that parent if they tried to seek help?
Yeah, they'd run into a lot of walls if they believe that there's something else that's causing these thoughts. So they would get an instant affirmation, or the child would get instant affirmation, and then the parent would be sort of manipulated to have to go along with what the child wants. And if they don't do that, then the parent is deemed as not understanding, old school, fuddy-duddy, needs to learn more. I I just took this training recently, actually, that was
Really?
wild. I need to post more clips on Twitter of it. I'm just trying to figure out how to wipe out names because I don't want to expose participants' names there. But I just took this training where I actually asked them, like, well, what if the parent asks you about detransitioners? And the instructor just went, first of all, just lied. Oh, yeah, it's rare. It's da, 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 da.
It's rare.
Yeah. Um, and then they do this whole thing. The instructor uses these therapeutic words. Well, we have to meet them where they're at. We have to help them grieve their cis child. But we go through the stages of grief with them because we know this is hard for them. So we're going to be really kind and caring and empathetic with, how hard it is for a parent. But we are going to convince them and strong arm them to go along with what we believe is the right path, which is to affirm and medicalize and send this child onto the path of lifelong health problems.
And to think I argued with the orthodontist a few months ago about pulling more of my daughter's teeth because I didn't think it was necessary. I mean,
Good for you.
I I'm just saying, like, I can't imagine being faced with somebody, first of all, you have a child who's in distress. Fair to say, right? If any child who is telling the parent, "I wanna change something so fundamental about myself as my sex and appear to the outside world as something different," is in distress, right? I mean,
Yeah, I
that's
see it
that's a
as a cry
given.
for help. It's some
Okay.
kind of cry for help. And in the level of distress, I think, would depend on the circumstances. Some are deeper than others, so it's a very case by case basis. But regardless, this is a cry for help in some shape or form, for sure.
Right. Now, one of the things I also love that you did in the book is you have a whole chapter called "Why Are Kids Doing This?"
Mhm.
And I I I just love that you go through, like, every conceivable possible reason. Not gonna lie, it was really validating because I'm not a social worker, I'm not a therapist of any kind, I'm just a mom, and that's why I'm telling parents watching this, like, you will love this because here you're hearing from someone who is a clinician who will be, echoing things that, you probably have already thought, just giving you more meat to chew on, like more reasons why that could be a reason for your child. So I was amazed at how comprehensive that chapter was in terms of all the different things, because I remember saying in a very general way on one of my shows, I can think of dozens of reasons why a kid would say this. One of the things I've heard, Pam, and I'd love to get your response to this, is, "Oh, come on. A kid isn't going to go that far for this seemingly trivial reason." Have you heard that before as an argument? Like, "Oh, come on. Now you're
Yeah,
being ridiculous."
I mean, I think if we were in a different environment, they might not go that far. But the problem is now in the environment that we're in, where it's reinforced in
Right,
everything that they interact with, their friends, the teachers, the TV shows, the commercials,
right,
the internet, of course, is the biggest one. It's everywhere, both in real life and online. So even just getting them offline is a big thing, but it's everywhere, even in real life. That yes, it's really easy for them to keep going down that path because that's all they know. That's all they see. They're swimming in it. They're like goldfish swimming in a trans fishbowl. And they don't see outside of that. To us, it seems radical because we know the consequences. Young kids, they don't know the consequences. And then they're all told, well, it's nice and it's fun, and you get rainbows and you get parades and you get belonging and, you get more attention. And nobody talks about the harms or the problems. That's all glossed over. So, and
right.
kids can understand that stuff. I mean, even adults aren't understanding that stuff.
Well, I mean, I'm counting here, even 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, uh 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Remember I said at least a dozen? 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 at least potential contributing factors. And as you said, we now have kids who are in environments where a larger number of these factors may be present for any individual child than in previous years or decades. And more importantly, they don't have as many outlets to escape from those factors. So whether it's
Exactly.
because of tech and you're on it all the time, and so factors, 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 because there's multiples that just exist within the text, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that could be messages from politicians, peers, teachers, famous celebrities, like all the things are in here. And they don't, our kids are like school, home, if they don't have an extracurricular sport activity or something, they're more isolated than in previous generations, aren't they?
Oh, for sure. And then they're also taught that they should find their identity. And if they don't know their identity, there's something wrong with them. So of course they're going to gravitate towards this. And
Right.
they're the pronoun thing too. There's a whole section about that. We'll get to that, but just
Yeah.
in this context, they're prompted to state their pronouns. They might not have thought about it before, but then they're sort of pressured by social anxiety or social pressure to state a pronoun. So now they might be locked in because in the moment that it might have been like, oh, I'm a they them, just because they felt like it in the moment.
Mm.
And then now they're kind of stuck and they don't know what to do. And they got some kind of praise or attention for it, and it's embarrassing to be like, well, I just kind of said that because I didn't really know what to say. you know um and so now they're locked in, and then what? And you've got kids that don't know, or struggle already socially. They were locked down for 2 years because of freaking COVID. And there are more kids on the autistic spectrum. We could get into a whole conversation about that, but that's another podcast.
Right.
um and so there's all these other vulnerabilities, and then we add in this factor, and yeah, it's a perfect storm.
Since you brought up the pronouns, another thing that you talk about in the book that I'd love for you to talk about a little more here is the danger in kind of just that, the danger in playing nice about the pronouns, whether it's with your own child or even with somebody else's children, such that your child follows, sees the example being set. Talk to the audience about why it is such a big deal.
Yeah, there's a section, it's called All About the Pronoun, I think is the name of the chapter, and
Yes.
then
Mhm.
and then I say, "What's the harm in pronouns?" Right?
Yeah.
And honestly, for a while, I didn't think there was that much harm, but I did think about what it, especially for children, developing children who are trying to figure out the world and trying to figure out what is real and what's not. It's very destabilizing to do these pronouns. So, um, one thing to think about is it's not just about them and their own pronouns, but even having their peers do it. That's destabilizing, because how are they supposed to make friends and connect with their peers when their peers are changing pronouns all the time? It's confusing, and it's hard to make a friend when that friend is like, well, today I'm Caesar, and yesterday I'm he him, and tomorrow I'm a cat, and you got to go with it. And how you expect kids to actually connect? I mean, we're isolating them enough with their devices and with lockdowns and our culture, and now we're telling them that your friends could change their identity at any second of the day, and you have to go along with it. And if you don't, you're a bigot. So that's not an easy environment to grow up in as a child. I honestly can't really imagine what that is like. That's one
Well,
example.
yeah, but I mean, it, you're absolutely right that that is what happens because two of my three daughters have had situations where a friend has said either they were non-binary or they were trans, but when they initially weren't, like when they first met them. And it creates a distance, even when your children are very loving, understanding children and so forth, there's almost like this imaginary wall of kind of hesitancy
Well, they know
from
it's
that.
wrong, and they know it's
Well,
not true. There's
y-
that too.
there's that,
But they don't want to admit
they're
it.
they're worried about their friend. Like
Yeah.
they know sort of instinctively something is not like right, but they can't put their finger on it, but they don't want to judge. Because most kids today actually have been raised in a whole I really don't want to judge. It's not for me to say kind of culture, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, in and of itself, especially for young people to not be judgmental, but it can run amok and go the other way to where you're like judging the grown-ups for trying to help you set some boundaries. But it distances them from the friends. And then children who are maybe already isolated and actually need the support of their peers or their friends who genuinely care about them as a person and aren't just wanting to claim them for their tribe or their, like their glitter family or, whatever, to like have them as property. Um,
Yeah.
they get pushed away because suddenly there's something you don't have in common that you don't understand. You don't want to hurt somebody's feelings by saying the wrong thing, but at the same time, you don't feel comfortable going along with it because it doesn't seem real. And then in one of my daughter's cases, the issue came up of, I feel weird inviting her over.
Mm.
Like I
It's so
don't,
sad.
yeah, because she knew my stance on pronouns. And I said, well, I'm not a cruel person. So I'm not gonna, but I will not use them. I will
Mhm.
call the child by their name.
Yeah.
That's the best I'm gonna do. But I know I'm not going to I'm not gonna concretize somebody's delusion. I won't do it. I feel like that would make me part of the problem.
Good for
And so
her.
then rather than having, this is what I said, but then rather than having that be conflict, She's like, all right, I just won't invite her over anymore,
Yeah.
which is heartbreaking because then like they both kind of lose a friend. And yet this, I think, is a situation that probably repeats itself every day
I think
all
this
over the
is by
country.
design. I mean, that's how the cult I don't do I use that word in the book? I don't think I say cult. I just
I
think I
don't think
say
you do.
cult like
I think it's apt.
it's just sort of implied. But that I mean,
Yeah.
the we'll just say the cult-like, behavior and patterns, that's how they're able to swoop in, because what they do is they take a person and they isolate them from their social network for
Right.
in the way you just described,
Mm.
because things become awkward and weird, and that person now thinks that their friend is against them because they're not going along with this new identity. Or even if they are going along, it's just still awkward, right? There's just still a
Yes.
distance. So I think that that's part of the what's going on is we're isolating kids from the people who truly care about them and sending them into the arms who how did you put it? That are you taking them as objects?
Well,
I
yeah,
like how you put that.
they
What
sort
did
of
you say?
claim them for they
Claim
claim them for
them.
their for it feels like a claiming. And rather than, once they announce or come out or whatever, I've witnessed some of these little ceremonies where they'll say, so and so is telling us that they're, and there's cheers and there's clapping and the child steps up. And when I say child, they could be 13 or 14 or
Right,
whatever.
usually a teen, yeah.
And there's clapping and hugging all around. And there's something between the body language of the hugging and the pulling in and the whole ritualistic aspect of it. It feels like a claiming. It feels like they've claimed in their soul.
Yeah, that's
Is
weird.
is literally what it feels like to me. And all I can see in my head is a crab bucket,
Hmm.
and that there are crabs in the bucket and they're going, come here, little crab, you can't climb out of the bucket anymore now. And the more they get pulled into it, so first it's the pronouns, then it's the coming out ritual, then maybe they change their clothes, they wear a binder, they change their body, they start taking hormones. It's harder and harder to get out. What is the percentage of children who are socially transitioned who end up medicalizing? Is there
I don't know that figure,
okay,
honestly, and I think
that'd
it's
be
just
interesting
it's
to find out.
yeah, I mean, I think it's changing rapidly because things are just going so quickly, and
Right,
the affirmation has become so
right,
intense where that wasn't as intense in the past. So it'd be an
right.
interesting thing. I don't know if they've even we can even put a number on that because it's
Look at this.
changing. Does somebody know?
No, but Poe movie says baptism. I never put that together.
Oh,
I
yeah.
never put that together.
Well,
Like,
everything is religious. So we both read James Lindsay's
yes,
New Discourses
yeah,
book, and that was incredible.
and
Um,
Logan Lansing's book talks about the queering of the American child,
that's
talks
what I'm
about it,
talking
how
about. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and but it just never clicked like the word baptism just didn't pop in my head. I'm
Right.
like, oh my God, that's so accurate. Wow, thank you.
It
And
is like that. There's a lot of
also,
parallels.
she asks, so confused as to why the affirmative model has even been adopted. It literally doesn't seem to exist anywhere else in treatment. I'm assuming mental health care treatment. We don't just say like to the person with anorexia,
Yeah.
would you like some liposuction?
Not to this degree, but I would kind of disagree with that at this
Really
point
interesting.
because
Okay.
therapy is more about making people feel good in the moment and get having their patients like them as opposed to helping them, and that goes beyond gender. So I think there actually is something to it. Yeah, we're not literally giving that liposuction to people with eating disorders, not yet, but I could honestly see
Wow.
that happening. I see like drug substance abuse treatment very similar to affirmation because we're doing harm reduction and we're actually giving them paraphernalia. They
Yeah.
say it's in the name of safety, but I see that as like a form of affirmative therapy because you don't want to shame them. It's similar, you know. So
Right.
there are some parallels outside of it, but it's not to that degree.
Right.
Something I've said in past interviews and on movies that I've been in. So when I had a hiatus, I left my job, my
Yeah.
profession in 2017, came back in 2021. I'd never even heard of the word affirmation before when I left in 2017. Like it got shoved into our language so quickly
Yeah.
and so inorganically that just affirmative everything and beyond gender. We got to affirm this. You got to affirm this person's feelings and affirm. We used to say validate, which means you recognize that that person feels those feelings, but it doesn't mean it's real. It doesn't mean that's what's actually happening. So you could be angry at a situation, um, and no one can take away what you're feeling, but the reality is that the person that got you angry may or may not have said something mean to you, and you need to figure that out. right?
Right,
So
that's
you
that potential for cognitive distortion
right.
might be there.
Exactly. So now we affirm everything, which means we just go along with everything as if it's real, as opposed to validate, which is more about acknowledging, for example, in gender, acknowledging that there is distress. So, yes, there is some kind of distress, whether it's about gender or not, it depends on the individual.
Sure, sure.
But they're maybe fixating on that. So that could be real,
Right,
but are they really a boy or girl trapped in a different body, or are they non-binary?
right,
Like, what is this about? Like, there's some other underlying issue, and yeah, that's what
right,
those 20 whatever somethings
right.
address. And I don't even think even in that list I got them all. I think I might have
No,
even added some stuff after I wrote that, because I've added a few more things.
yeah, I think I mean, but like I said, when I remember just off the cuff saying, "I read a number of a dozen reasons," I just kind of pulled a number out of thin air, to be fair. I wasn't being exact, but I was, like I said, it was a little bit validating for me to be like, "Wow, you underestimated how many," and yet most people I speak with, they'd be like, "Well, why would someone do that?" And you're like, "Well, this and this and this." You start listing off reasons, and that's when you usually hear, but would they really do something that extreme as say, I'm really a boy, I'm a girl because of social pressure or because of the internet or because of this or that? And
If it's
and
reinforced, for sure. Yeah.
exactly. I want to thank Roscoe Aria for the super chat. Thank you so much. And I'm glad
Thank
that
you.
you appreciate the topic. I think this is very important for everyone, like not just parents. I think it's everybody right now to understand what's happening to the next generation. Remember, these are going to be the kids like the joke is running our nursing home, but also running our country. And
It's our
it kind of
future.
it's
This
our
that's
future.
it's
Yeah.
really big if you think about it.
Yeah.
It's not just about, I mean, of course we care about individual kids. We care about our own kids the most, but
Right.
then you pull back, this is about our entire future, the future of our country, the future of the Western world.
Yeah.
And if we can't know
Exactly.
what is a man or a woman, we're screwed.
I would say we do need to actually reproduce the species to survive.
Yeah.
Um,
And the
and
disabilities and all that. Yeah, so much. Yeah.
oh my gosh, I think it's another Google Play is not Google Pay. Roscoe is raw, but happy to give it to a good cause. I am so sorry. I think you can recall it. So if that is
Oh,
something
that's
that you want,
funny.
if that's something
Oops.
you want to do, Roscoe, I think you can go in on the back end and you can do that. So I won't be insulted if you feel the need to go in and say it was double. And I think they will honor that. So thank you so much, though. Um, so on the validation topic, wasn't the purpose also a validation to build trust with the therapist, that they're being heard? In other words, if somebody is coming to you and they're in distress or in emotional distress, they have to trust you because in order for you to provide any therapeutic benefit, then, obviously there needs to be trust, but you're going to need to be able to challenge them and say things they may not want to hear. Otherwise, you are just their friend. Like you're not just, and not really a good one either. You're just a mirror. And so
Which
you
is
need,
unfortunately what's happening nowadays.
right, you
Yeah,
need to
on a
trust
bigger
the
scale. Yeah.
you need to trust the person. So then my next question to you is, and you do discuss this a little bit in the book about the manipulation of therapists, but have you thought about what are we getting different kinds of people going into or staying in therapy, specifically for children in particular, because of all of this? So in other words, is this kind of weeding out one kind of therapist and leaving another kind in?
Well, I believe Abigail Schreier's on a tour saying this too, but I've been saying this for a long time, is too many kids are in therapy that don't need it. And I think kids are over therapized. Your entire channel is about social emotional learning and all this, preventive therapy, which is just completely, it's creating more problems. So we're making
Mm.
our kids neurotic with this. And I think too many parents unfortunately have been trained to run to an expert and don't trust themselves to problem solve, and or even just find other solutions. I wouldn't
Right,
say just handle it on your own and suck it up, but also there are other solutions. There are other people in your family. There are other support networks you could reach out to, and probably also because our society is changing, maybe people have less of that social network and are relying too much on professionals as opposed to
right,
an aunt, uncle, grandma, whatever, where that kid could go to and talk to them, as
right,
opposed to just sending them straight to a therapist and then having them be in it with a therapist indefinitely.
right.
That's and this is a problem I've always seen in my practice for a long time, and I've always fought against it, but now I think my profession isn't fighting against it anymore, which is parents always had the this is, I'm speaking in generalizations because it's not of course nothing is everybody, but I'd say as a whole, a lot of parents expect or hope a therapist will fix their kid. So if their kid's
Yeah.
having some kind of behavior problems or some kind of emotional problems, they expect or hope the therapist is going to say some magic thing or do some magic work to fix their kid, and the parent goes off. They don't really want to be involved. So, as a therapist, my role has always been to educate them that, I can't work with your kid in a vacuum. And a lot of what your kid is going through has to do with what's going on at home and your relationship, or maybe the dynamics with the siblings, or something that happened to the family 2 years ago, whatever it is. But the parent needs to be involved. And now therapists are actively shutting parents out. So I
Oh, yeah.
emphasize that
Mhm.
in the book. And that's why I believe now school counseling is not good, because that just lends itself to kids being seen without the parents involved. I mean, literally, oftentimes in secret, but even if the parent knows about it, the
Right.
parent's not involved in the process. So you should never have your kid in therapy without you involved, because, I mean, it's just, I don't want to say it in a mean way, but like, your kid's problems is related to you in some shape or form. It's got to
Without a
be.
doubt. Without a
I
doubt.
mean, maybe
Yeah.
not. Maybe it just could be you all went through something. There was a family I met where the girl decided she was trans, when they lost their home because there was a storm and a tree fell on their house and they were all displaced.
Right.
It's not like this is a dysfunctional family. They just all went through something, and then she lost all of her things, and they were displaced for quite a bit. And it was soon after that that she gravitated towards being trans. I think it was also around the lockdown, so she was isolated on her computer. So there's this perfect storm, literally perfect storm in
Yeah.
that situation. But you need to involve the family. If I was a therapist not talking to that family, not talking to the mom, I might not make the connection to that loss, and that displacement, and try to treat her for something completely different, which is what's happening all the time now with therapists. They don't talk to the parent, they don't get the full picture, and so they don't know what they're doing. But they think
Right.
they do. They think they know better.
Right. And I'm just going to read a couple of these comments. So, Poe Movie says, being a special needs family has forced us to advocate more as parents and learn to say no to professionals when our gut alarm sounds.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, and being a good parent precludes laziness when your kid is in therapy or in no school system is 100%. You're so right. This is I think though one of the things that's keeping some parents, I mean I think some parents want to set it and forget it. I'll grant you that. But I also think there's some parents who are deathly afraid
Yeah.
that they're being judged by the therapist,
Mhm.
and that if they're judged the wrong way, that maybe they could lose their child, like literally lose their child, that some recommendation might be made to the state to take the child away. So I think there's a sense of the therapist now as the ruling authority on their right to continue to parent this child, with language like we're saving lives
Mhm.
and acceptance, parents who must, accept and affirm and all these things. It really does feel like, from the perspective of as a parent myself, that there's this wall going down. Like the second your child declares, I have gender dysphoria or I have any kind of a gender, disturbance, um, the parent, you're not the expert now. We have special knowledge. That's the whole Gnostic thing. We have the special knowledge about this. You don't, and you better back off, or else you're a fascist, a Nazi, a judgmental person, an abuser, all these things. And I think there's a certain percentage of parents who are just like holding their breath, trying to figure out, do I go along with this person even though what they're doing sounds horrible to me, or do I yank them back and have the police show up at my door and take my kid from me?
Yeah, I would pull the kid.
I
I
would too, but, and then, Roscoe points out, and this is something that I've said about myself too, because I was a big tomboy. I'm gay who played dress up and played with Barbies as a kid. I just can't fathom if my parents had taken me to a gender clinic for this. Can you imagine
Yeah, and that I
the
talk
things that
about
we
that
did that
too.
were different? Yeah, in the book, it's
The real conversion therapy, right? That's what we're doing. We're converting kids who are gender nonconforming, and a lot of them grow up to be gay. That's why Gays Against Groomers has such a loud voice, because they know that, and they know that it's, in a lot of ways, attacking them. and, who they would have been. It would have happened to them if they were young at this time. So they want to protect other gays and lesbians that would otherwise, grow up gay.
Right. Now, you do have a chapter on WPATH,
Yeah. I
and
know,
for
it's
the
great. It's great
I
to
know, I
read.
was like, "Wow," and I
I
wanna
didn't
come
know this
back.
is when yeah.
Yeah, when she was writing this book, you guys, she didn't know what was about the bomb that was about to drop from Michael Schellenberger, but
I mean,
if
I
you
knew
ha
there was the files. I actually knew
y
because
y
I went to the Gen Spec conference and they talked about it, but I didn't know when they were gonna release it,
right,
and I didn't
and
know
that's
what
what I'm
was in it.
saying. It's like,
Yeah.
what perfect timing. But yeah, you do discuss WPATH, and I think it was probably the hardest chapter for me to read of the book.
Mhm.
Um, Even though I read it before the files came out. If you guys don't know what the WPATH files are, um, check X, check the news. It's becoming the medical scandal of our lifetime. And I believe it's gonna make the whole lobotomy thing look like a very small deal. But the chapter was hard to read because even then I'm reading this and realizing like somebody like, although you were very polite to continue to refer to Dr. Bowers as Marcy Bowers.
Oh, I did, yeah, but I I
Yeah,
I
so
avoid the pronouns. I use their name, but
yeah.
I was like, "Oh, no, did I write she?" That would have been a mistake. Actually,
I don't think
I
you wrote
try to
she.
avoid
This
the
is
pronouns.
We're talking about the main surgeon. This is the surgeon who did the surgery on
What is
Jazz
Marcy? I don't even
Jennings.
know Marcy Bowers', I
I
guess,
think
formal
people either
name
call like
former name.
it's like either like Marcus or Michael or something. And I think it's something
Okay.
else with an M, but I don't know. But Marcy Bowers, I'll say it. Marcy Bowers is a man.
Yes.
But you said trans woman, which I mean, I guess is what people would call Marcy Bowers. But this is the surgeon who did the surgery on Jazz Jennings, which, if people have followed along with Jazz Jennings, has been an absolute nightmare for Jazz Jennings. And so, yet, this was the group, WPATH, that set the supposed standard of care, for these surgeries and these treatments. And even in your chapter, what Pam does so well in the book is explain how their claims are completely unfounded. So here was this organization that other doctors, pediatricians, therapists, parents, school counselors, etc., were deferring to and saying, well, WPATH says X. Well, according to WPATH, it's this. This is the standard treatment. This is the protocol. This is what we're supposed to do. They were featured. Marcy Bowers is in the What is a Woman movie. So if you've seen that movie, you have seen this doctor. And it's monstrous how
Mhm.
much everybody just deferred to an organization without really checking, or worse. And Pam points this out so well, shutting up the people who challenged it.
Mhm.
So, like, there'd be one or two doctors, people like, hey, hold on a second. It doesn't really say that. These statistics, the suicide stats have been debunked. And then the first somebody says that, it's like you're
Even
censored.
it was another trans woman,
Yeah.
another man who identifies as trans named
Yeah.
Erica Anderson,
Yeah.
who
Just
actually
shut
spoke
down.
out and was, I think, I wrote this a while ago now, was president for a couple of years, I don't remember how many
Yeah.
also, but it stepped down,
Yeah.
and was shut out because Erica said, "This isn't right. We're doing this too much with kids."
Can you
Yeah, so
imagine being in that position where you absolutely know? So you were in the group and then you see them doing something wrong and you're like, stop doing this, but they don't listen to you. They shut you down and they do it effectively. And you are sidelined, silenced, and out of the picture. And meanwhile, watching this all go on, I cannot imagine. I just from reading the WPATH files, I have nightmares already. Like
yeah, I haven't
it is
read all of it because for that very reason, like, it's
it's
too much for me to process.
big
I know
mistake.
already enough, like, it's
Big
like
mistake. Yeah. If you guys are going to go consume it, I strongly recommend you do it in pieces and have a support system nearby, because if you care about anything, if you care about children, if you care about the truth, you're going to be every from hopelessly sad to enraged. There's like mixtures of emotions that I'm not comfortable with. But I thought that the chapter on it did a fantastic job. Even if the files hadn't come out, your book alone gives parents in that chapter plenty of rebuttals. So what's going to happen, parents, and this is one of the reasons you need to have this in your possession, is that you may still, if you encounter something like this in the next 6 months, year, even probably 2 or 3 years, you will still encounter people who are going to reference those statistics. They might not say WPATH when they do it because they're still trying to eke out an income, and but they'll still cite it. And you know how I know? Because I went to the doctor a few weeks ago and I was advised to get the what injection that I never got.
Yeah.
And how much do we know now about what a farce that was? And you go to that, and it's like
I think there's a lot of parallels between that, by the way.
There's a lot of parallels.
I see it the same thing, different thing.
Exactly. It's like it's going to take a while for them either to catch up in their own knowledge, because let's face it, if you're engaged in doing something for a living, or you've bought into a treatment protocol and maybe even base your practice on it, maybe it's all over your marketing materials, maybe it's part of your identity now that you're one of the people who helps kids with this, right? And suddenly comes a bombshell. Now, there would be some really honest, principled people, but they probably wouldn't have gone this way in the first place. But let's just say they exist, who might overnight say, I'm scrapping it all. We got to start over. The vast majority will cling to the lie until the last possible second. So if you happen to run into it, let's say there's a school counselor, would be the most likely. I don't think you're going to voluntarily go to one of these therapists, especially if you have Pam's book, but your kid may cross paths with a school counselor who's preaching chapter and verse, whatever WPATH has said in the past, because they haven't caught up. There were still people pushing Lucy Calkins instead of phonics. Okay. And we know. So you need this because you will have you'll be ready to say, yeah, that's not true. And you'll know exactly
it
why.
arms you with the facts is the goal here.
Absolutely.
And to empower you to not be intimidated by their mantras that we're the experts and you don't know anything. You do know stuff. You said that in the very beginning of this conversation, that you're just a mom or whatever, and that it's relieved to hear that me as a professional is saying this. Well, I'm glad you feel relieved. Maybe that's my goal, but really, my real goal is for you to recognize that you know this stuff already, and I just give you the words, the language, and the studies, the sites to basically fight back, because when you're vulnerable, you don't have all the talking points at your fingertips, but here it'll give it to you. But if you know something's not right as a parent, listen to that gut. No matter what expert you talk to, that don't just trust experts.
Nope.
Believe in yourself.
And that you have I had pulled, because I have all kinds of things pulled here and underlined. Oh, here it is. Okay. So I had pulled out the table of contents because I also want people to hear that there are chapter titles to on that theme of empowering you and giving and arming you. Okay. So your chapter 3 is why are kids doing this? That's the one we talked about with the 25 plus. There's probably more than that I didn't even get to because I kept turning pages, but reasons why children might do this. There is the issue of what about clownfish and intersex, because you might run into someone who tells you that. Now, I thought that was funny that you actually dealt with the clownfish thing. Have you ever encountered somebody who seriously said to you, what about clownfish? And they meant it.
Not in person, only online. I haven't heard that one, but the intersex one, that one's common.
Right. Can you explain to the audience why intersex is not a third sex?
Yeah, I quoted Colin Wright, who is a scientist, where he talks about intersex. It's basically a birth defect where someone has a different arrangement of chromosomes. That's normal, but you still have the two gametes, the male and the female, and so in a way the intersex still reinforces that we have two sexes. So that was the quote. He said that you're basically proving my point. But the way I always thought of it was, well, okay, this is a birth defect. So this is this is the real rare, very rare situation. And there are people who have birth defects all the time. So, for example, someone is born blind. Does that mean we're not a seeing species? People are born without a leg. Does that mean we're no longer people? People aren't bipedal. If you so you're going to take a small group of people who have a certain birth defect and say, well, that means our species is has can have a million legs because
Right.
or have, 0 legs, I don't know. Um,
Exactly.
then
Yeah.
it's kind of ludicrous when you really think about it. You take the left does that well.
Right.
They take an exception and they make it the rule, but then when there's a real exception, a real situation like the detransitioners, and they say, "Oh, no, they're rare. That doesn't really happen. That's only 1%." I get into
Right.
that too. Um,
Exactly.
but yeah,
Well,
that's the way I explain it.
there's no logic on the
Yeah.
left. It's pretty simple. If when you understand even just basic logic and you listen to some of their arguments, you immediately hear how ridiculous they are. But what I'm noticing is I walk around expecting most people to like recognize illogic and irrational thoughts and I continue to be surprised, that
I know.
wow, I guess, like recently y'all may have seen some videos have been coming out of Oklahoma. Like what the heck is going on in Oklahoma where they have children at the high school having events where they lick
Oh, yeah.
things off the adults' feet and armpits.
Yeah, I'm kind of ignoring that, and
It's super gross, and
I
I
don't know what that's about. I don't really wanna know.
I don't either, but it's one of those things where you think, someone had to make the decision that that was an okay thing to do,
Yeah.
and they shouldn't have, and they did anyway. And I feel the same about all of this stuff, is that I kept waiting over the years, like, somebody's gonna say something, right? Like,
Yeah.
somebody's going to put a stop to this, right? And here we are just with more and more ridiculous rationalizations for it that don't add up. And so what you're giving parents is actual tools, unlike a book that would just describe the problem to you or just say, here's what it's about and here's where it came from. Not that that's not valuable, but
Mine's like the
if
next step after you read those
the
books.
next step, when you put
Yeah.
down that book and you say, all right, well, that's awesome. Now, what do I do when it walks in my door? And this is what this book is. So other chapter titles you have are how to talk to your trans child. And you did put that in quotes because there's really no such thing like a vegan cat,
Right.
how to talk to them. But in that chapter, you have all these different questions. Let me ask you, how did you do the questions that you've come up with come from your clinical background? Are they a combination of that and your work with detransitioners? Like, how did you put together the list of questions to ask and the ways to talk to the child, to re-engage with the child?
Yeah, well, first of all, I wanna put a caveat is I started that chapter by saying there is no script, and these are just ideas to bounce this is just to bounce ideas off of, 'cause, like,
Right,
I can't tell you how to talk to your kid. I don't know your kid, I don't know your relationship, I
right.
don't know what's gonna work and what's not. There is no magic wand, no magic thing to say. These are ideas to think about, and then for you to use your discretion. So, that's what that was. 'Cause, yeah, I don't want people to be like, "Oh, well, Pam the therapist said to ask this, and it didn't work, so, but I can't know. I mean, humans are, different. But where
But
did I come up with
they're
yeah.
so good though. But go ahead, tell us where you came up with them, but then I'm gonna share one or two.
Sure. So where did I come up with them? I mean, yeah, a lot of it was just common sense. Like, I guess, yeah, my clinical background, like just if I were working with a kid who had something, like just exploratory questions, open-ended exploratory questions. So, um, in a way, like I think if you are going to see a therapist, you're probably better off seeing someone that has no expertise on gender because it's not about gender. This is about whatever else it is. And so a lot of those questions just came from just, open-ended asking open-ended questions. Some of it came from, yeah, listening to or talking to detransitioners, meeting and talking to parents who are stuck. um it those questions came over time. Like, I didn't just sit and bang them all out at once.
All right, sure.
I actually wrote something on when I did my launched my website, like, was it now 2 years ago or something, about a year and a half ago, and I had a whole bunch of questions, but since then and I got more experience, I kept adding more things. Like, when I would read something on Twitter and it would just spark an idea, "Oh, I should think, like, add this on or add that on." So, um, it's a combination of what I've read, what I've listened to, people that I've talked to, and yeah, my clinical background.
Well, what struck me is when we think about the affirmation model, which schools, school counselors, therapists, and pretty much like everyone in the world is being told like, do that thing. Just say, oh, okay, you're trans. Like, I'm just going to accept it. Many of these questions are questions that ought to have been asked. Like, in other
Yeah.
words, the kid comes and says, I want to change my pronouns. Imagine that happened organically. Let's pretend for a moment that the 6-year-old wasn't being asked, what are your pronouns? So that's very inorganic. But instead just volunteered it to a teacher. I'm trans, whatever.
And be like,
Questions
why?
like, what does trans mean to you? Like, open-ended, like I said, what does trans mean to you? Like, let's first ascertain whether the child speaking to me has any semblance of understanding of what it is that they're saying to me. They might think, I feel pink, like if they're 6 or even younger than that, they could think they're saying something really innocuous, like I feel like a princess or something,
Right.
and not I'm trapped in the wrong body, right? So what does trans mean to you? And then things like, what makes you feel like you are the opposite gender, so that you can identify if the kid is buying into gender stereotypes.
Mhm.
But they don't even ask these questions,
Mm-mm.
open-minded or not. It's like, oh, you are, therefore you are.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's by design because this is about turning our society upside down.
Well, that's kind of the next thing I wanted to get to, because it's come up, when Poe Movies asked it and said, why did we move to this? Do you think we moved to this affirmation model? And it's probably a minefield, because none of us can prove, it's because this, like, this is the
There's
reason.
a lot of forces, yeah. It's not
Yeah.
one
So,
thing.
yeah. So what's, if you were kind of musing about it, what do you think is behind it?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, the biggest easy thing to point to is just money, right? So people have there's a lot of money to be made from this. So money and power. Um, so I see this I think politically, like I think politicians have a lot to gain because when these young people who are getting into the trans identity, one, they become dependent because they're they're just taking hormones and they have to depend on that, but also their bodies unfortunately break down. So when you're in pain or you're weak or you're not able to, you're not strong, you're more easily controlled. And then the government can swoop in and say, "Here, I have these benefits for you." I mean, I think I talked about it in there. Like, I think around time I was writing that, San Francisco had just put a program to, give trans people a stipend. So it's like an incentive to get more people dependent on the government. So it's like this whole power thing. And then they're training all these kids to be these social justice warriors and have this victim mentality. Um, I've just been tweeting about, that young girl who died after having a fight in the bathroom, Next Benedict. Um, but we don't really know what happened to her, and all we know is the cause of her death had nothing to do with the fight, and the trans community is taken her as they're trying to make her into a George Floyd, where they're, trying to make her a symbol of the fact that they're all oppressed and there's this trans genocide. And, and I've seen tons of posts of people saying, this is so horrible, and they have this whole outrage, and then they're in this outrage spiral, and of course you're more controlled when you're in that state of mind. So there's this hive mind with that. So it's a lot of the trans is beyond just like whether you think you're a man or woman, and there's this whole culture behind it.
Right.
And a lot of it has to do with this victim mentality that, they're under attack and they have to protect themselves, and they deserve all these rights. And if you misgender them, then you're killing them. And, there's just all this stuff. So the power,
Right.
the people are basically like very easily controlled. It's interesting because in the New Discourses book, in the Queering of the American Child, it helped me put into context. So people who are trans, they believe they're the enlightened ones, and that we're the ones that are, stuck in the matrix of not knowing the reality. But we see them as the one that are not living in reality and are being controlled. So it's interesting. We both
Yeah,
see
you're
each
right.
other.
So
The opposite. Yeah. But
right.
they're the ones actually being controlled, they're the ones destroying
That's
their bodies, they're the ones that are believing lies that the media is telling them. They're the ones voting for people that are keeping them more dependent on the all of this stuff. So, I mean, who is really behind it? I don't know. Globalists, like, we could.
well, I mean, there's I've heard arguments that there because most people are put on, especially puberty blockers, and then, cross-sex hormones young and things, that their likelihood of being sterilized is very high. And
Yeah,
of course, if they actually have surgeries that remove their, you know, sexual organs, then they are sterilized. They can't have children, they can't reproduce. And so I've heard it suggested that because such a high percentage of them are either on the spectrum or have ADD or have some other kind of mental issue, that this is just a roundabout way of sterilizing people with autism.
eugenics.
Yeah, a kind of
I was just
eugenics.
talking about that with someone and
Mhm.
making the parallel between abortion and that's a whole other
Yeah,
hot topic, but, why is Planned Parenthood so invested in this topic, right?
right,
Taking the vulnerable and sterilizing them and then giving them, uh, making it much harder for them to build a family and build
right,
connections. I mean, how do we connect
right.
with people? Through our bodies, through sex, and you're taking away their ability to have sexual pleasure.
Well, you're taking already socially anxious people and you're reducing their dating pool by 99%.
Exactly, yeah. And then
So, yeah, what's that about?
right, and then you take, then on the opposite, so you're either, like, kinda numbing them out, physically, or the testosterone increases sex drive to the point where people make really, reckless decisions, and then they have a lot of shame, and then they, they have more problems, physical and emotional as a result of that. So you're it's like it's a spiral of behaviors that can cause more problems and more isolation and not true connections and not true embodiment. They like to say they're embodied as trans people, but I would say it's the opposite.
Right, right. It's it's so very sad.
It really is.
I definitely see the similarities to occult mindset, special knowledge, and we're the enlightened ones, but we have to go through this transformative process. And it used to be like you'd have to do some kind of drug, ayahuasca or mushrooms or something to have some enlightenment, LSD. This, I think, is like, they have their euphoria from the hormones and the surgeries, but it wears off just like the other drugs wear off. And eventually you find you're right back in reality and having to grow older
Mhm.
and grow up and grow older in this new mangled body that these supposed healers have given you or sold you, or is better to say. Um, the other
It's
thing that
masochistic too, if you think about it.
it
There's this
really
masochistic side to it. Like you have to suffer for the cause. You have to prove that you're really dedicated with your suffering. There's a
that
lot
is
of that.
definitely a religious thing, and then that, like
Mhm.
I said, the ritual to it. You also have a chapter called, "What Else Can You Do?" And then really the one that I love so much, because and it's gonna be so useful for parents, is how to screen for a gender critical therapist. And I think this chapter is not just for a gender critical therapist.
Yeah,
This
I
is
I kept it I made it broader, right?
Yeah, it really is, like, I was reading it going, "This is the how-to for picking a therapist, period, period."
And
So
that's
even if
what
you're
came
an
from my
adult.
thing.
Yeah, if you're an adult and you could the book is of value to you for that chapter alone if you think you ever need therapy, because the whole discipline of psychotherapy has been warped and twisted. The American Psychological Association, right, has just adopted like some crazy new standards and of what's a disorder and what's not a disorder and so on. They're definitely moving towards, in my opinion, legitimizing pedophilia,
Mhm.
and having it not be something that's wrong with somebody. The paraphilias in general, they're being very weird about making it okay while at the same time pathologizing grief.
Right.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
So,
And calling
imagine
everything trauma,
yes,
everything you don't like is trauma, and
Mhm.
as a trigger. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because if you think about it, in one, if we depathologize the paraphilias, autogynephilia and, pedophilia and some of these things, then we can keep supporting the whole anything goes queer agenda. And if we pathologize things that are normal things that you go through in life, like you said, regular stress, grief, even deep grief, even, loss of a loved one that lasts,
Yeah,
the
it's
grief lasts a long time,
life.
life, and you call everything a trauma. Well, I can sell you lots of pills
Mhm.
if I take things that happen to most people often and say that's a thing.
Right.
What do I sell the person? What do I do that I'm gonna get any benefit? I mean, your average person who's a pedophile isn't running for therapy.
Yeah, true.
Okay, this is not really happening. Um, and so what's in it for them? There's just not much in it for them. And I hate to be cynical, but I think you're right. I think the most obvious is money
Mhm.
and drugs, and there's a lot of money in drugs.
For sure.
So how do we get more people? I know for a fact, talking to whistleblowers from who used to work at pharmaceutical companies, that their business model is get as many people on as many drugs for as long as possible. They
Wow.
don't care what the drugs are. That
Yeah.
is their business model.
Well,
So
yeah,
if you
makes
think it's to
sense.
help people, it's not to help people. It's get as many people taking as many drugs for as long as possible, and then you can have lovely, tidy profits. And it's very hard for me to say because I'm a capitalist and I believe in, free enterprise and the free market. But there's something super twisted when the other disciplines we count on as checks and balances to protect us from fraud,
Right.
because there's no fraud in pure capitalism, that's stealing. They're not working. They're playing along. So then what do we have? We have Pam's book and ourselves and our common sense, right? I mean, that's what I felt like. I felt like you were throwing parents a lifeline going, "Okay, parents, here goes." Like,
Here's some stuff for you.
you're
Now
floating in the
go.
ocean and the ship just sailed away. That like the rescue ship is
Yeah.
is telling you like have fun swimming, and here comes Pam going. I really
It's funny you use that because I used to be a lifeguard.
That's so funny. But it does. It feels like a lifeline of practical, actionable things, questions. The other thing I felt, even though I haven't gone through this specific thing, I've tried to put myself in the role of a parent who might be facing that kind of a situation. And I think to myself, how unsettling is it for the parent? So, the kid's going through something for sure. The range of emotions, the guilt, the shame, the feelings of fear. Fear, I think, would be the number one feeling that a parent feels that, you know, all of the things that come naturally. Then on top of that, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? What if I make it worse? What if I can't make it better? What if this is how it's going to be? So all the what ifs. And what I loved about how you put things, the language is very calming. It's very
That's
straightforward.
cool.
It
Thanks.
no, it's really important, like, when you're reading a book that is supposed to be providing you guidance, the choice of words, the sentence structure, everything in this is very soothing. It's very, very matter of fact, but not in a clinical way.
Yeah,
So
I
if your
really tried
guys are
to stay away from the clinical language. I tried to stay
Yeah,
away from, like, therapy theory. I tried to put it straight, but not
yes.
mean, but just
It
straightforward.
it
No,
it is.
no, no big words.
It's
Yeah.
just solid enough, and scientific enough to be grounding and stable and feel secure. Cause I think that's what parents want. Like, give me something to hold on to because I feel like the earth is shifting beneath my feet, right? Is it what I imagine? And so that you'll get while at the same time, and you said that in the intro, is like compassionate. That language is very, it's not touchy feely and warm and fuzzy, but it's just very clear, very soothing, very. I found reading this book, like, if this ever happened to me or someone I care about, I would feel better immediately knowing that I had this, knowing that I could just go to it and be like, all right, I don't know what to do, but I'm gonna go read this and I'm gonna calm down and I'm gonna make a plan. And that is the last thing I'll say is that I think the way it's structured in this book is it does help you organize your thoughts and plan what you're gonna do next. So you don't feel like you're scrambling or, I can imagine when something like this happens, with your child, there's probably this feeling of, I want to fix it now, yesterday, like make it go away. Right. But you can't do that because you might go off and do, something like irrationally, as you point out. But the book is short. You can read it easily in a day. You can digest it. There's, like you said, there's nothing complicated about it. The chapters are clearly delineated. So whatever stage you're at, you know where to go and like, all right, now I need to understand this and I'm going to read it. And you will have, I think, a better path forward and an ability to speak with authority to doctors, to school officials, and most importantly, to your child. They're probably, tell me if I'm wrong about this, because being a social worker, you know more about this than I do, but even if the kid is coming at you like, this is who I am, and I think our children still look to us to be strong and
Mhm.
set boundaries and keep them safe.
It's a test.
I
We have to
really
hold
feel like
it.
that.
We're the grown-ups. We have to be the grown-ups. It's not easy, especially when you're feeling insecure and you
Yeah.
don't feel like you don't know what to do and you feel like everyone's against you, but you're still the grown-up and your child's depending on that, even when they're acting like a little shit. They still, you love them, they love you, and you'll always be their parent, their mom, their dad.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really important. Really important. So I feel bad because like it's your book and I've done most of the talking, but I'm
Well,
just
I
very,
really appreciate this
I,
analysis
well,
because
I'm
usually I
very,
have to explain. I'm like, "What did I write again?"
well, no, I mean, I felt I was a little hesitant because I'm like, okay, I, I'm happy to praise the book, but like my praise was so effusive. And like, they're going to think I'm a weirdo because I'm like fawning over this book, but understand something. I, um, I spoke to parents, what was it, not quite 2 years ago now, whose kids were suddenly trans, like ROGD parents. They came on anonymously and I did a whole show. And that was gut-wrenching.
It's really
Hearing it wasn't happening to me, but I had like secondhand anxiety and pain and frustration, just, feeling what they were going through. And then since then, with the different things, different stories I've covered, different in the curriculum I look at and seeing what kids are being subjected to, I've felt very helpless. Like I can try to educate people, but I can't give them these answers. I don't know. I'm not a therapist. And then you say to people like, well, maybe your child needs to talk to somebody. And like, who? I can't find a therapist. And because I've come to you when I've had situations where I'm like, I think I might need to talk to somebody, even just for myself. And it's like, who can I trust?
yeah.
The whole profession has been corrupted and captured. So then when I read this, I was like, there it is. Like somebody sat down and put it in a book and and so here it is. And I'm very, very grateful because now I know exactly what to do when somebody comes to me. I just go, this is the book. Here it is. And
Thank you.
I can rest easy that if they actually buy it and they actually read it, they will be in good hands, in very good hands. So I'm very grateful to you for doing it. And everyone else, be grateful to them.
And then at the end I think I've added some since the copy you read, but the
Oh,
end is
yeah.
a really comprehensive list of resources. So
It really is.
pretty
And
much every organization, every book, every movie that I could find on this topic, that doesn't say affirm
yep.
children, I put in there. So, and it has other books that are good that are written on this topic. Miriam
Yeah.
Grossman wrote a book, and the ladies from GenSpec wrote a book. I honestly didn't read their book on purpose because I wanted
Yeah.
to keep my ideas mine and not
Yeah.
muddy it. But I put in all of that information. I put in all the documentaries that I could find that are on this. There's
Yeah.
actually there are several, and every time I thought I had them all, I'd be like, oh wait, there's this one and that one, and I probably didn't get them all. I did
Right.
my best, and then
But you
there's
also
even
have a glossary.
yeah, oh yeah,
So
and then I
there's
did
also
my
a comprehensive appendix that not only has the resources and the lists of books and movies and all kinds of things, but there's a glossary of terms because they have so many acronyms, so many terms that you might be tossed around if you get some counselor or somebody says, oh, well, your child is this, or your child comes home and says something. And where that's really important, and we didn't really talk about this, But Pam has a chapter in the book about kind of things to look for. So this is not, this is when your kid hasn't told you anything yet. So you're just as a parent observing changes in behavior. And she gives you a list of what kinds of changes in behavior, what kinds of behaviors, period, that you can be on the lookout for to notice like they might be at risk or something is coming up or going to come up if you don't intervene and do something or have a conversation with them about how's it going. Like, I think the moral of this whole story with all of this is that we parents have to do a much better job of connecting with our children. As
Yeah.
much as we were connected when they were little, we can't pretend that because we sent them off to school that they're grown up. Okay, they still need us. Our homes still need to be that safe, secure place with very clear boundaries, somebody who they can go to with anything. And there have to be regular times for that, whether it's family dinner, whether it's just a regular time of tucking them in. Yes, kids who are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 still need to be tucked in. I know people stop when they're like 5 or 6, or they go to school and more, it's tucking in goodnight or whatever. Keep on doing that. Talk to them about their day, how they're feeling. And the more those lines of communication are open, if they start feeling like, I don't feel good and my friends are picking on me, whatever, you get in there first before the friends, before the social media, before all these other influences, the 25 or 26 or however many influences, you're there first. And so Pam gives you some lists of things to look for that you can be like, I need to get in there. I need to redouble my efforts to pay more attention. And that to me was very helpful. That's like a wake up call for all of us. I don't know anybody, myself included, who's doing a perfect job of
You don't
connecting with
have
their
to be.
child.
Yeah, I mean,
You don't do perfect, but you
that's
you
the
do
point. I mean,
you do need to. Would you agree though that we sometimes forget?
yeah, I mean, it's sort of like a wake-up call.
Yeah.
I've heard parents say that been through this and came out the other end, that in a way, like a piece of them has some gratitude because it helped them be a better family.
Yeah. Yep.
So, it was really a cry for something in the family system needed to improve, whatever
Yep.
that is. So,
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
parent needed to learn something,
Yep.
whether to be more present, maybe be off their phone more, maybe not to argue in front of the kids, maybe tuck them in at night more often, maybe have more family dinners, really just being more present with their kids and, the
Right.
way your family would do that. And
And that's
so
not to say that this happens to your child because it's your fault. That's like, I
no.
don't think that's the point. The point that we're making is that there's so many different inputs. There's so much stimulation that kids are getting now that maybe we didn't get when we were kids, that
Mhm.
they're sorting through at a time where they're also growing and trying to figure out who they are. And then now you have as one of those inputs, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Like, people
Yeah.
constantly asking and demanding that they define it right away. And so if we get into the headspace by accident, it's usually by accident of thinking that they're going through similar stuff to what we went through. Just something as simple as that of like, well, I was a teenager once, so yeah, it sucks. But that, well, you weren't a teenager with a smartphone, or you weren't a teenager whose friends all have smartphones, and these things didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I've had to remind myself, I'm like, oh my God, yeah, wow, I forgot.
And
Like
social justice culture and the media at you all the time, and just,
all of it.
it's just a different world. It really
Yeah.
is.
The
Yeah.
generation gap, I think, is bigger
Yeah.
between parents today, even if you're only, 25 years older than your child, which most of us, I wouldn't say most, a lot of people have kids later. So it's already a little bigger than maybe our parents had. But then I think culturally, so much has happened with technology. And like you said, just shifts in the culture, from tradition and family and all kinds of things, that it's a bigger gap. Like, instead of being a 25 or 30-year, 35-year gap, it's closer to like a 50-year gap,
Mm.
I think. And that's been the hardest thing for me to realize, is that I have to like stick my ear to the ground and be like, what's life like for you down here on planet teenager?
Yeah.
Because I haven't visited in a really long
I
time.
mean, I honestly can't wrap my hand around what it would be like to grow up in the world the way it is today. It's to not have a frame of reference from what I had when I grew up. which
Yep.
was there was no period of time where everybody had to be shut in their house for months until they were going to kill their grandma if they left their house. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Just
Yes.
stuff like that. All the fear, all of the
Right.
division, all the race baiting. It's just there's so many things. Being told if you're white, you're privileged, and these messages were not thrown at me when I was growing up. So
No.
I have so much gratitude that I grew up when I did, and I have a lot of empathy for kids going having to grow up in this environment and having to make sense of it all.
Very
So
true. And I think back even on I've talked to my youngest about this, at length because she said to me once something along the lines of, that she would be okay if smartphones just never had been invented. Like
yeah,
I asked her once about it and she said, I said, would you, just like in a heartbeat, I wish they were gone. Like she uses it, but she wishes they were gone for everyone, not just me. It's not like she's saying, Mom, get off your phone. It's like all of it, her friends, herself.
yeah, it's even around you. Like even when you decide I'm gonna put my phone down, I get so frustrated because I'll be like, I'm not gonna come with my phone, and I'll go out to eat, and then I'll have this stupid thing where you have to look at the menu on your phone, or you have to do some kind of ordering on your phone. I'm like, I left my phone in my car intentionally. I don't want to do it right now. Like, I hate that you're making me go back to it. But
Exactly.
and just being around other people on their phones, and then the whole like missing out on important information because you're not on your phone.
Right.
How do you strike that balance? It's tough.
Exactly. And, to hear somebody, I thought that I mean, I loved parts of my childhood, going out riding your bike and just freedom to go wherever you want to go. But it never dawned on me how lucky I was because I had like actual abuse in my childhood. My mother was crazy. And
Yeah.
I left the house half the time to be safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but
And you were able to.
but I was able to,
Now you'd
right?
be tracked, but with your
exact
GPS.
I
Yeah.
had a place to go and she wouldn't know where I was and I could come back when it was say my dad was home again and whatever. And then, there were so many advantages. I didn't have to worry about the dumb stupid stuff I said or did being caught on video and
Right.
stuck on the internet for all to eternity. And doing this work and even talking to my teenagers has made me so grateful and like you said more empathetic for they have a completely different set of stressors. And so when we say things like, tune in and try to be more present in things. And it's advice I give myself. I'm not exempt from this. It's not blame. It's just to say it really is different. And you might not have thought about it. Like you might
Yeah,
not have stopped to think about it because you're busy. Most people have to work or they're, caught up in their own stresses. And it, if like COVID, for example, affected the whole family.
for sure.
Parents were at home that were usually out. So like their whole structure of life and rhythm was off too. And that it's a what happened to us for those 2 years as a society, as a world was I think we'll be writing books about it for 100 years as
Yeah,
far as
I still
what it
can't
did. Yeah.
process it, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, but
So,
yeah,
but
basically what this trans cult does is it takes families who have some kind of vulnerability. It doesn't mean you're bad or wrong or anything like that, but some kind of vulnerability, whatever that is, whether it be, you know, uh, having a kid with special needs and you need to pay attention to the sibling who has special needs, so then the one that doesn't have special needs is feeling left out and but doesn't want to say anything, so then they become trans as a way to call attention to themselves. That's one example that's happened that I've heard, I've met.
Mhm.
Or the other way around. Sometimes it's a sibling that is like the star of the family, the star
Yeah.
athlete and the straight A student, and the other one's kind of meh, and they feel invisible, and how can they be seen? They'll become trans. So you might not have noticed that before because they're not a troublemaker. A lot of times it's the kids that aren't the troublemakers that turn trans. They're like the more quiet ones, the more soft-spoken ones, the ones that kind of blend in the background, that are kind of a little more, you don't they're not looking for, they don't cause trouble usually. So that's also why a lot of parents get blindsided because they say, well, my daughter, my son was such a good kid, like didn't cause any trouble. This is out of the blue. So um, a lot of it has to do with they don't feel noticed. I mean, that's a
So
simple way of
sad.
saying it. It's obviously going to be more complicated. And like I said,
Right.
I listed a million things that
Right,
it
right.
could be, and then you have to think about your own family, like, what's going on, everyone's an individual.
That's true. And the thing we didn't talk about, because it's not really a focus of your book, but there's also the component of its this whole craze has uh given some pretty bad parents an outlet
Oh,
to
yeah.
use
I
their
I
children.
kind of don't even know what to say about them, but yeah,
I don't know what to
they're
say, but I mean there's one on the internet is like all four of her children are trans.
yeah, I know.
What are the odds?
Yeah.
So
Right.
meanwhile,
And
average mom and dad in, where Montana are having their kid basically like kidnapped and taken across state lines or whatever to be trans against their will because reasons. But that parent is free to do whatever.
right.
That
Yeah, it's
blows my mind.
backwards. It's backwards.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah, I haven't
silly.
really gotten into those parents. I mean,
That's a whole other
that's a whole other thing.
pathology, I think. Yeah.
I don't try to reach them. They have to, part of it is, I mean, obviously it's about their own issues, but I think some of them are really just so misguided and they'll never backtrack because it's just too painful for them to realize that they've done
Right.
something wrong.
Right.
There's that video going viral with Colin and Christina Buttons with and
Yes.
Chloe, and it's a mom who kind of loses it on them, and it turns out that's a mom of either one or more trans kids. And my hypothesis is she lost it on Chloe. She lost it because she heard Chloe's story, and it got to her. It was too painful for her to really recognize that at least the idea, the possibility that she
Mhm.
could be doing the same thing to her own children, so she lost her mind instead.
Right.
So, I think it's just they just can't
It's
fathom
so
it,
sad.
and then they're in this bubble that reinforces it, so they don't hear the other side. It's awful. It's
The
awful for
whole
everyone involved, really. It's just
it
ugh.
it really is. So, I mean, this to me was like a bright light in all of it because the kids who are right now, not yet facing it have a shot as long as their parents buy this book. I'm serious. Like I almost feel like it's required reading. It's required library. You have to have it on your shelf in 2024 if you have children. Period. You
Thank
just
you.
just do. So right now it's available in Kindle, is that right?
So I didn't get to correct you in the beginning. It's on pre-sale for Kindle, so you can purchase it,
Pre-sale
but it will download to your account on Tuesday, which
on
is March
Tuesday.
12th, Detransition Awareness Day. That's why I picked that day. And then the
Awesome.
soft cover will be also available on March 12th to order.
Awesome.
I can't do the pre-order for soft cover because I don't have a publisher. I've learned all these things. The people who can do pre-order for all the different formats, it means they have a publisher who can
Right.
do it. If you're self-publishing, you can only do a pre-order of the Kindle.
Awesome.
So that's what I put out for pre-order, just so there's a link. And then, yeah, it'll be available after March 12th. And
Okay.
there'll be a hardcover too, but I haven't formatted the cover yet for it. It's a little bit of a process. So that
Uh,
won't be available on March 12th, but probably the week after if
Great.
people want hardcover. But it'll be in softcover, which is I think what most people would want. So
And I do think, my recommendation is that people eventually have a soft cover, have an actual physical book of this. And the reason I say that is that, it is the kind of thing you're going to want to refer to and like, have marked with things if this is affecting you or you think it'll affect you. It's a reference book. I mean, it reads like a book. I mean, it reads like, it's super easy to read and all that, but it still serves as a reference tool because of the questions, because of all the appendices and all the stuff. So I just think that's my personal bias is I like to put like tabs and things. So
yeah,
that's just my
I
recommendation.
think most people are waiting for the
Yeah.
hard what is it? The real deal, the
Right.
non-electric, oh, no, what's the word? The
The
hard
soft copy.
copy.
Yeah, the hard copy.
Hard
Yeah.
copy, the real book.
Well, like I said, I mean, you sent it to me electronically, but I printed
Yeah,
it
I was like,
out.
I see you with a printout. That's so cool. Yeah.
I have to have hard copies. I need to because take my highlighter and I mark things and but I need to like touch it. I like books. I listen to audiobooks, but they're usually not reference books,
Yeah,
right? So it'd be like novels
right.
or
It's like you're in a
just
story.
commentary kind of stuff. But something like this, you have to have in your hand, I think. Anyway, That's me. But, I'm very grateful. Is there anything you wanted to add, like, as a final thought on this whole thing for people about
You really
therapists
covered it.
manipulating it?
I mean, my whole goal with it is, yeah, really just to empower people, give you the tools and give you some ideas. Obviously it has a lot in there, but it
Yeah,
can't have everything. And my hope
sure.
for you is to read that and maybe think of your own ideas too. Um, there's more information that is coming out, but it gives you a really good uh,
Yeah,
place to stand up to these professionals that will manipulate you. They are trained to manipulate you. There's a whole chapter on that because I went
yep,
to their training. I called it emotional manipulation, I think was the name of the chapter, right?
yep.
Uh, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, they use blackmail, emotional blackmail,
Totally.
gaslighting. It's all that it is really quite
They
abusive.
act really nice to you and you're vulnerable, so you think that they're being nice to you, but they're
Mm-mm.
actually messing with you. And I
Yep,
think they believe they're doing the right thing. For the most part, I think most of the people that are executing this are well-intentioned and misguided, but the people that are leading it, I don't believe are. So,
well, every time I've thought about it and I think, "Oh, they believe they're doing the right thing." I don't excuse them. I mean, I believe it, but I don't excuse them because first of all, they're therapists. So they should have, more than the average person's level of self-awareness of their own
yeah,
biases
but
and
they
their
don't.
they should. I thought that therapists were supposed to have therapists. In other words, you're supposed to like gut check yourself against somebody
Yeah, it's
else.
all is out the window, that's the problem. Yeah, so we used to like, when I was coming up the ranks, yeah, that was encouraged and certain programs required it. And then also the fact that I was a supervisor, so I would help people, like, to check themselves so that they don't fall into that rescue fantasy, which is really what's going on in a lot of these cases where people project what they think what they needed when they were a child. A lot of these people are people that didn't fit in when they were young for whatever reason. They were gay or lesbian or something, and they felt like an outcast. So they are projecting what they needed onto these kids, or they're just projecting that need of being the rescuer onto kids.
Sure. Sure.
And it's being reinforced by all of the institutions, by all of the trainings. And it
Mhm.
really is easy to be bamboozled. I wonder, I mean, I hope that I'd be smart enough, but I'm wondering if I were like a 22-year-old just out of grad school or in grad school learning this as the only thing,
Right.
I might be bamboozled too. I don't have a frame of you wouldn't have a frame of reference. And then if you're 22 and all you've grown up in this social justice culture that we've just been talking about, again, no frame of reference. So you think this is what it is to be a good person, is to make sure that you affirm someone and make sure that you accept them for who they say they are. And they keep saying it's the data says that they're suicide, and they say it in a very like with a lot of authority, and they say it really fast, and they don't give you time to think about it. So if you haven't thought about it before, it's really easy to
Sure.
just be fooled. I mean, it is. I mean, once you're already in once you see it, you can't unsee it. But if you haven't taken the time to think about it and you go to one of their trainings, I'm telling you, they really are convincing. They talk fast, they talk quick, they talk in this way where they sound like they're really compassionate and nice. You know how it
Mhm.
is.
Yeah,
Um,
the certainty. People who
Yeah, and they
sound
don't
very
give time for
certain.
questions or for thought,
Yeah.
for reflection. I remember going to the one training, it was this luncheon, and, they talk fast the whole time, and I remember I literally left, like, feeling nauseous, and, like, I felt it in my body, but I couldn't even process everything that I heard. Like, it was, but everybody was clapping, like, "Yay," and that was Dr. Joanna Olson Kennedy, by the way, and her husband, who's a trans
Right.
is a woman who says she's a man. Aiden and Joanna Olson Kennedy. I didn't know who they were at the time. That they're infamous for. Well, Joanna is the head of the L.A. Children's Hospital Gender
Ugh.
Clinic, and she is very infamous for saying that if you want to get new breasts, you can just if you cut off
I've
your
heard
breasts and you
her.
change your mind, that's her. And then you can just go get new ones.
Yeah,
And then
PS that your insurance won't cover it. Mhm.
yeah, and you can't because when they change your nipples around,
Yeah.
they graft your nipples. It's not that easy. You can't.
No.
And of course,
It's not.
you can't
There's
replace
also scar
real breasts.
tissue. They don't tell
Yeah,
you about scar tissue. They don't tell you about,
and the nerve
how
damage.
breast implants actually work, and I mean, you won't have enough
'Cause you need to
skin
have
left.
breasts. Yeah, they take
It's
that away. It's not you can't just add it on. It's I know. Because I've talked to a lot of deep transitioners, and they think about getting a surgery, a reconstructive surgery, and it's really difficult. It's
Mhm.
just not that simple. Like, there's this weird magical thinking in the trans world, like, you can just do that, to do that, like this
Yeah, you're
transhumanistic
not
way of
Mrs. Potato
thinking.
Head.
Yeah,
I
like,
mean,
just
it's
get a thing. Like, just get this body part, get that body part.
no,
Like,
no, we're
yeah.
not we're not at that point yet of, being droids or whatever,
I
and
don't
it
yeah.
it's so disturbing, and like I said, I don't let them off the hook because they constantly talk about, and you wrote about this as well, with how they're trained to manipulate, but they're trained to deal with what they call pushback
Mhm.
and backlash. And so if you have to have training like en masse in strategies to deal with pushback, whether it's from parents or anybody else, or even from other doctors, that ought to be a red flag that maybe you're doing something wrong. Like if there is so much pushback, what?
Mhm.
Most people, most people, you don't have to be a rocket scientist or a PhD. If something makes sense and it's actually aligns with like reality and so forth,
Truth,
most
yeah.
people will support it. Most people will be like, even if they don't know all about it, be like, okay. But if people start asking you lots and lots of questions and you call that pushback and you come up with training to manipulate them and shame them and guilt them and throw statistics in their face that are just designed to emotionally manipulate them, I'm sorry, you have no business being anybody's therapist. Because that
Totally.
right there, that you sitting in the training, that should be like, um, that's abuse, what you're teaching me to do right there.
It's a shame, and I think also that this weeds out the good ones, so that's part of
That's
it. So,
yeah,
um, good therapists do not engage with this stuff. A lot of them will say even, people of all political affiliations, they'll just say, "Yeah, yeah, I don't do that stuff," like, they
exactly.
don't realize how bad it is, but they know enough that it's not for them, and
Mhm.
they just think it's some fringe thing on the side, and they don't deal with it, and then they do their ethical work. I
Yep,
remember walking around that camp conference, this was in Silicon Valley in California, very left-leaning, and I remember just going around just saying, very basic common sense things like, "I believe in working with the family. I believe that, kids don't know themselves when they're young, and we need to help them,"
sure.
like, whatever, and everybody agreed with me, but if you say it in those plain terms, they all agree. But if you say it in their little like, propaganda language, then they also agree with that. But they don't realize what they're actually agreeing to, if that makes sense. It's
Or they take what you said, that's something like, "Well, I believe in working with the family," whatever, and they twist it to the meaning that they want, like, yes, browbeating the family into agreeing with me.
yeah.
So
Well,
they don't even
the people I was talking to wouldn't do that, is what I'm
well,
trying to
I'm just
say.
saying, but the people who do this stuff, if if you ask them like, what I liked about your questions is they're framed in such a way that it will be much harder for the therapist to put one over on you and answer in such a
Yeah.
way that is like they're using a different dictionary for the same words.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
that whole messing with the language. Yeah, because this other training I just went to recently is via Zoom. It was
yeah.
about involving the family, and the whole premise of this instructor was like, "I'm a family therapist, and I really believe in involving the family." But of course, what they really meant was, "I believe in manipulating and coercing the family to
It
stay to do what I want."
yep,
So
exactly.
anyway,
Alright, I'm gonna go through some of these last comments
yeah.
and just,
Any questions, comments for anybody?
Associate says, "I find it interesting that, as I said before, some will give testimony of having been born one way or another recently, and still none will admit to being born sociopath."
Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably not gonna find someone saying, "I was born a sociopath." Let's see, then, see the judges. Those without media and preschool moderation attempts oddly don't have any idea of these things. So you mean like when people don't have so in other words,
Moderation
it's
attempts.
probably not in other words, if it were organic and they weren't in preschool, nobody was asking for the pronouns, or they didn't have access to media, social media. If it were organic, you'd still see kids or like on the Amish kids, or you'd see
Right.
kids like popping up being like, I had been born in the wrong body. And like interestingly enough, without these influences, That's not happening. I'm guessing that's what you mean, see the whole truth, but if I'm wrong, please correct me.
Also,
Um,
with to that point, when I
mm,
was working in the Bay Area at the that clinic, I was working with teens, but I was also working with adults. So I was sort of a float between the teen and adult program. And
yeah.
in the teen program, half the girls were trans. In the adult program, zero trans. So if this were organic, and because we're so more accepting in society, why wouldn't we have adults that are trans too now coming out of the woodwork? But we're not. Hmm. And that's the same
Hmm,
area and the same level of acceptance. And I actually was there was double the amount of adults because there were two different tracks. There was like the mental illness track and the substance abuse track. So there were more adult patients and just a smaller track for teens, but yet a much larger amount of teens who were trans, and not even one. I didn't meet one trans adult that whole time.
right.
Maybe there'd be some more now, but that was in 2021. So
Now, I wanted to bring this up. Poe Movies, who, by the way, says that she's going to buy your book, it said, well, parents can trust our content. Do you create content? Because I feel like I'm missing something. We've missed grants and rejected funds in order to reject critical theories so we can provide accurate education content. For if you could let me know what it is, I'm curious. But congrats, I'm glad that you do. Because this is not to plug us, but hey, it's true. But I don't know what you're plugging, so but you're welcome too.
have to
And then
look
let's
at it.
yeah, that would be great. And then Adam says, I'm glad I grew up in the era of books, Nintendo, NES, and alfresco shenanigans with fellow nerds. We didn't have
Super
a
Mario Brothers.
yes, we didn't have a tree clubhouse though, LOL. And
I
this I
had a
thought
treehouse.
you did. I'm so jealous. I love tree houses. See the whole truth says as a social construct that lives by recruitment, it's no different than an introvert being asked into a circle.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I think you mean it says they do have targets they easily
Yeah,
identify.
the autistic kids especially. They even have an autistic flag if people aren't aware of that. So they have a flag with like it's like an infinity symbol, and I didn't even know this before, but
That
apparently
means
that's an autistic symbol, and they have it on the rainbow. That came out last June during Pride. So and there's products that like they have like the little stim things and the ear things, things that for people who have sensory overload, the autistic population, they'll put little trans symbols on these things and sell it to kids.
wow.
Mhm.
Um I
So
just learned
recruitment.
today, and I can't believe I never put this together. I feel like I missed something. But Kate Wand, who I follow, and I was on her channel a couple weeks ago, she did a video about sort of like how to tell the truth always, whatever. And she pointed out that the colors on the flag, the rainbow, everything trans and all, that all the colors match the colors of the SDG goals.
Hmm.
So when you look at like all the colors have added and all the things that they align to the SDG, the global SDG goals.
Wow.
There are 17 of those goals and the colors align.
Wow.
And I was just like, I got to chill. It just went like, ugh.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
it's
it's like
it's
a globalist flag, right? That's what
it
it is.
basically is kind of like the new world of the new world order has a flag. That's
Yeah.
that's basically it. And so okay, so uh Poe Movie says, yes, our channel is education content. Schools use our films and content as well as homeschoolers. Well, I will have to check that out. Thank you for referencing that. See how many great resources there are where people said, yeah, that's not going to work for me. We're making our own. And so I'm gonna check that out. Thank you very much. And hi, oh, that already got that. And then Corporal Giroro says, late to the party, good luck on your ship. Yeah, we can watch the replay. So I'm really again so grateful that you shared this book with me early so I could read it
Thank
and that you came
you.
on to promote it. And I hope in my small way that I'm able to promote it for you because I really, really want everyone to get this book. Because I don't want another child, like dead serious. I do not want another child from this day forward to go through this. I want children who might grow up to be gay, children who might grow up to be lesbians, children who are going to grow up to be straight or asexual or whatever it is that they want to be, to just grow up. Number one, I want them to grow up, their
Mhm.
bodies to develop, their brains to fully develop without a bunch of tinkering. And you use that word, they are tinkering adults getting their piece of this and
Yeah.
claiming them as their property. That is not okay. But
Yeah.
parents have to get between them They have to protect their kids. So,
For sure.
yeah. So where can people find you? I know you have a really robust Instagram.
Yeah, I'm more active on Instagram than Twitter, although I've been on Twitter more lately. Oh, it's driving me crazy. I can't be on Twitter.
It
But
is crazy making, yes.
my Instagram is at the dot truthful therapist.
At the
My
dot truthful therapist.
Yeah, the truthful therapist was originally taken when I was looking for a handle. So there's a dot after the truth therapist at truth therapist is my Twitter. I have a Substack, which is Pam the Truthful Therapist Substack URL. I don't know how it goes, but Pam the Truthful Therapist Substack. I do have a YouTube. I don't have one like yours, but I just upload things on there randomly. It's just like
But you have a lot of reels. If you guys go
yeah,
to it's this, right? The dot truthful therapist
that's
at
it. Yeah,
Instagram. Okay. If you guys go here, she has lots of really cool reels. Some of them are just fantastic
some of
where,
them are just funny.
they're just
I try to
funny.
be funny.
Yeah, they are funny actually. And they, role playing and to do different stuff, but kind of trying to, make fun out of it as much as possible. But check that out. You're also on Twitter and then buy the book. And I think
And then
hopefully we
I've been
make
in
some
2
progress.
documentaries I can
Yes.
mention. Um, so the Epic Times had a really my favorite one is the Epic Times one. It's called Gender Transformation, and, you can find that at gendertransformation.com or probably just through the Epic Times website and their films. And
Okay.
the reason that one's special is they did a docudrama, so they actually used actors, and so it did a really good job of the storytelling with actors so that you really feel the emotion. It tells the story of Abigail Martinez and her daughter.
I know that
If
story.
you know that story, it's quite tragic.
Yeah.
Um, and then it strings in experts and detransitioners and people who lived it, and of course Abigail is in it, is highlighted in it, and she tells her story. But then it has actors, and it shows a young girl go through what Yaeli, the
Mhm.
daughter, went through. So that one is special and is very neutral in terms of it doesn't bring in religion, it doesn't bring in politics. It's actually the director, he's from Sweden. He's not even American, so we can't call him a Trump supporter or anything like that. He's just a guy that saw what happened in Sweden and got interested in this topic, and it won an award because it really brings in your emotions. So I really like that one. If there's one documentary to see, I'd recommend that one. Or if there's someone you wanted that is interested in it, that you're like wanted to sit down and watch something, that's the one to recommend. It's $4 to watch it. And then the other one that I'm in, it's called Disconnected. And it's disconnected but spelled with a Y, so DY is connected. And
Okay.
it's on Amazon now. But
Is
I
it?
think
Okay.
yeah, it is. You have to pay. It's not Prime,
Oh, I
but it's
see. Okay.
yeah, but you can download it via Amazon. It came on if and not I don't know, 6 months or so ago.
Mhm.
But you can I think it's also disconnectedmovie.com is its website.
Yeah, I put
And
the link in there in the chat.
and that one is also really effective. It follows a detransitioner named Daisy, who I will spoil. She actually now has 2 young children. She just had another baby,
Awesome.
which is really like a miracle because she was on testosterone for 5 years. It's like I cried at the end of that one because at the end she finds out she's pregnant after all of the trans stuff.
Yeah.
And it's really well done. That one though, I think it's great. However, someone who would be turned off by religion might not connect to it because it does get religious at the end. It's done by a Christian, so that might turn somebody off if they're going to be rigid on that issue. So,
Yeah.
but those are the two that I'm in that I are my favorite.
Well, it's worth mentioning. I mean,
Mhm.
because especially if somebody's trying to refer a friend
Yeah.
to watch something, you wanna make sure that, people are gonna be receptive,
It's too
and
bad that, like, it becomes a block, but unfortunately,
it
it
happens.
it happens. I mean,
It
it's even
happens.
true with my own family, I think. I don't They haven't even seen it, like, I think you know, they'd be
It's
weird
like the
about
people who
me.
won't see the what is it, Sound of Fury, whatever.
Sound of Freedom?
Sound of Freedom, rather, Sound of Fury. So it should be Sound of Fury, but Sound of Freedom. Yeah, the people who wouldn't see that movie was so powerful, and I'm so
Yeah.
glad I saw it. But there are people who won't see it for the similar reason of Jim Caviezel, and they think it's religious and all this, and it's
It's
not.
not even religious,
It's
it's
not at all religious, it's just a
yeah.
story. So, I mean, but it's true, it's based on truth, and I think the
Mhm,
other thing is people are afraid that what they're gonna see is gonna be so upsetting that they don't wanna subject themselves to that. But I would say both in terms of that movie and although I haven't seen these movies, I've seen some clips and trailers. I think they are very tasteful and take great care to leave out the most they don't do graphic things.
mm-mm,
They allude to things that are very upsetting, but you don't actually see anything gratuitously graphic. So, it's just what's necessary to help you understand the awfulness of it
mhm.
without, like, shoving it in your face. So, I think that was well done, and from what I can tell, these 2 movies, were likewise well done in that
They're
way.
really well done, and then if you buy my book, then you'll see I list, like, a gazillion other films
Right.
and,
Yeah.
that talk about this topic. There's several others that are well done, so
Right, exactly. All right. Well, very grateful to you. Thank you for being here. I will next Friday have on live Dennis Kavanaugh. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he's over in
mm-mm.
England and he's a lawyer and he's been just hammering on he's a big gay rights activist, but
Okay.
he's also been hammering on all this stuff on that side of the ocean with mermaids and so on. He's been on the channel a
Oh,
couple
okay.
times to talk about this. But when the W Path files came out, I mean, you know, like me, we're both been like, so I've asked him to come in and talk about the
That's
implications of
great.
that. Also, from a legal standpoint, maybe he's got some insight. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm hoping that this will help, make create precedent for these cases that are sitting there that maybe could end up getting dismissed, but this brings in more evidence, so I'm hoping that's the
Yeah,
case.
fingers crossed.
Mhm.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And if you have just arrived and not able to see the whole thing, the replay will be up immediately. And if you are watching on the replay, thank you. Um, please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.